Have you ever noticed how some people just don't seem to get rattled? No matter what life throws at them? They lose their keys, they laugh. Someone snaps at them in the grocery store, they shrug it off and move on. Meanwhile, the rest of us, we hear one-off comment from a family member, or catch a strange look from someone, and our whole day takes a dive. 1 minute you're fine, the next you're spiraling. It happens so fast, you don't even realize it. You're suddenly angry or hurt or second-guessing yourself, and you're not even sure why. That feeling, like your emotions have taken the wheel and you're just along for the ride. It's more common than you think, especially as we get older. And let's be honest, when you're over 60, your time and peace of mind are too valuable to be given away so easily. You've lived through enough to know this much is true. Peace isn't just a gift, it's a choice. But to make that choice, you have to learn how. That's what this video is all about. We're going to have a real conversation. Not about pretending nothing bothers you, but about learning how to stop reacting to everything that doesn't matter. Because once you do that, you start living from a place of calm strength. A kind of quiet power that can't be shaken by petty drama, nasty comments, or the noise of the world. Let's start with something we don't often talk about. You're not reacting to what's happening. You're reacting to the story you're telling yourself about it. Think about that for a second. It's not the late reply that upset you. It's the thought, "They're ignoring me." It's not the glance someone gave you at the doctor's office. It's the thought, "They're judging how I look." It's not even the words your son said. It's what you think he meant by them. And those thoughts? They come fast. They feel real. But they're not facts. They're interpretations. Most of the time, without even realizing it, you've written an entire story in your mind, and then reacted to it like it was the truth. There's a powerful quote that goes like this: "It's not things that upset us, but our judgments about those things." Simple words. But when you really understand what that means, it can change your life. Because here's the reality. You are not powerless. You don't have to live at the mercy of other people's moods or comments or silence. You don't have to give your peace away every time someone says something off or ignores your message. The problem isn't the outside world. The real problem is the lens you've been looking through. And let's be honest, by the time we hit our 60s, that lens has been cracked by years of life. Maybe someone left you. Maybe you spent decades being criticized or feeling unseen. Maybe you learned early on that you had to over-explain yourself just to be accepted. Those experiences don't just disappear. They shape the way you see the world today. It's like trying to look at a beautiful sunset through a dirty windshield. The colors are still there, but you can't see them clearly. Not because of the sunset, but because of what's clouding your view. You might walk into a room and feel like everyone's judging you, but maybe they're just tired. You might read a text and assume someone is mad, but maybe they're just distracted. You might think someone's words were meant to hurt you, but maybe that's just how you heard them. It's not about blaming yourself. It's about realizing you have the power to clean that lens. And the first way to start doing that is by recognizing the pattern. Because most of us have been taught since childhood to respond to what we see, but never taught to question how we're seeing it. When someone makes a rude comment and you find yourself spiraling, it's not just the words, it's all the old echoes those words bring up. Past wounds, past doubts, 1,000 old voices saying you're not enough even though you've already proven that you are. There's another quote that hits deep. "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." That means until you really stop and question your reactions. You'll keep repeating the same emotional patterns over and over, and think that's just how life is. but it's not. It's how life feels when you're reacting from old pain instead of present truth. So how do you change it? You start with one small but powerful habit. The pause. That tiny space between something happening and your response to it. That pause is your power. That breath before the anger. That moment before you fire off a message. That choice to wait, to breathe, to question instead of react. There's real strength in that. Not loud, aggressive strength. Not yelling over people's strength. But calm, grounded, unshakable strength. One wise person once said, "Anyone can become angry. That is easy. But to be angry with the right person, to the right degree, at the right time, for the right purpose, and in the right way, that is not easy." That's not just about anger. It's about all emotions. It's easy to react. It's harder, but wiser, to respond with intention. That's what emotional maturity really looks like. So here's something simple you can try the next time you feel yourself getting triggered. Whether it's during a phone call with your daughter, or while watching the news, or even just scrolling social media. Pause, breathe, and ask yourself, is this really about them, or is this poking at something inside me? That one question can break the spell. It gives you a moment to see clearly, to step out of the automatic loop your brain is used to running, to remind yourself that not everything deserves a reaction, and certainly not your peace. Now I know what you might be thinking. It's not that easy. And you're right. It's not easy. But it's possible. And more importantly, it's worth it. Because the alternative is a life where your emotions are like a roller coaster someone else is driving, where every little thing gets to you, where you lie awake at night thinking about that one sentence someone said, while they're probably sleeping just fine. But when you start practicing that pause, when you start questioning your thoughts instead of blindly following them, something amazing starts to happen. You stop feeling like a puppet being yanked by every little string. You start feeling like a person, steady, calm, whole. And that kind of peace? No one can hand it to you. You build it one moment at a time. It begins with awareness. It deepens with practice. And eventually it becomes who you are. Let's keep going. We've talked about the power of the pause, and how questioning your reactions can open the door to peace. But that brings us to something deeper, and maybe a little uncomfortable. The world has trained you to react. From the moment you were old enough to understand language, people were shaping how you respond. Parents, teachers, TV commercials, social expectations, all pointing you in one direction. Care what people think, and care a lot. You were rewarded for pleasing others, for blending in, for saying yes when you wanted to say no. And if you ever dared to speak up or stand out, you were labeled difficult or emotional. It's no surprise that by the time you hit your 60s, you've spent decades reacting. To win approval, to avoid rejection, to fit a mold that was never designed for your peace. And don't think it stops when you retire. In fact, in this digital age, it's louder than ever. Social media platforms are built to keep you emotional, to keep you scrolling. They reward conflict, outrage, comparison. They whisper in your ear, you're missing out. You're falling behind. You're not enough. Not because it's true, but because when you feel that way, you're easier to control. You ever notice how you can feel totally fine until you see a photo of someone else's vacation, or a political post, or a perfectly polished grandparent baking pies with 10 grandkids, and suddenly you feel less than. You didn't choose that emotion. It was triggered. And the more often you're triggered, the more reactive and exhausted you become. There's a reason for that. Emotional reactivity isn't just a personal flaw. It's a profit model. The more easily upset you are, the more ads you click. The more insecure you feel, the more things you buy. The more you're pulled by every headline, every post, every opinion, the less time you have to think deeply or live meaningfully. But what if you unplugged from that? What if, instead of being someone the world can poke and prod at any time, you became someone with an emotional dashboard, and you were the only one with access to the controls? Imagine this with me. A panel strapped to your chest. It's got buttons labeled anger, shame, guilt, jealousy, insecurity, and everyone around you knows exactly which ones to press. Maybe your sister hits the guilt button when she brings up the past. Maybe your son presses anger when he says you're being difficult. Maybe your ex-friend taps jealousy every time they post online about their life. And every time those buttons get pushed, boom, you react. But here's the shift. What if you took the panel off? What if you unplugged the wires? What if you stopped giving people that power over you? That's the real goal. Not to never feel emotion, but to stop handing out your peace like free samples at the grocery store. Your energy is not up for grabs. Someone once said, the more emotionally reactive you are, the easier you are to manipulate. Think about that. The people who push your buttons don't need to control you physically. All they have to do is say the right thing, and you do the rest. You spiral. You doubt. You shrink. But when you stop reacting, the power dynamic flips. You're not being cold. You're being clear. You're not shutting down. You're choosing wisely what deserves your energy and what doesn't. Let's talk about how to build that strength. Because it's not just about unplugging, it's about learning a skill most people never master. It starts with a phrase I come back to often. Observe. Don't absorb. You walk into a room. It's tense. People are snappy. The air feels heavy. Old you? You'd absorb all of that. You'd get irritated, defensive, or drained, without even realizing why. But the stronger version of you? You observe. You notice. They're tense. You think, that energy isn't mine. And you let it stay where it belongs. With them. Same thing goes for harsh words. Someone says something mean? Old you might absorb it, take it personally, replay it 100 times in your head. But now, you pause, you breathe, you ask, does this really reflect me? Or is it revealing them? That one moment of separation is where your peace lives. There's another powerful tool that works hand in hand with this. Mastering silence. In today's world, silence is underrated. We're trained to clap back, defend ourselves, explain everything. But sometimes the most powerful response is no response at all. Not because you're weak, not because you're afraid, but because you're in control. When someone throws shade and you don't react, you don't explain, don't argue, don't feed the fire, they lose their grip. The drama starves, the insult fades, and you stay rooted. There's a quiet kind of strength in that, a strength that whispers, you don't get to decide how I feel, only I do. This isn't about becoming emotionally numb, it's about becoming emotionally wise, because there's a difference between reacting and responding. Reaction is instant. It's emotion in charge. Response is intentional. It's you in charge. And yes, this takes practice. No one becomes a master overnight. But every time you pause instead of snapping, every time you observe instead of absorb, every time you sit in silence instead of lashing out, you're training a new muscle. A muscle most people never even know exists. You're breaking the old reflex. You're rewriting the code. Because let's be honest, for most of us, Those emotional reflexes were installed long before we were old enough to choose them. We were taught, if you're stressed, panic. If someone criticizes you, defend. If you're ignored, feel worthless. If you fail, spiral. But what if you could create new scripts? What if, when stress hits, you breathe instead of panic? When someone disrespects you, you smile instead of snapping? When old pain creeps up, you respond with grace instead of guilt? That's not weakness. That's evolution. That's you stepping out of the cycle and reclaiming your mind. Because here's the truth. The strongest people aren't the loudest. They're not the ones who win every argument or get the last word. The strongest people are the ones who can stay calm in chaos, who can walk away from drama, who don't need to prove anything because they already know who they are. And that strength, it's available to you right now, not in some perfect future, not after you fix every flaw, but today, in this moment, with a breath, with a pause, with a choice. You've started to notice something. You're not reacting the way you used to. That old need to defend, explain, please, or explode. It's quieter now. The pause is growing longer. The silence, deeper. And for the first time in a long time, you feel something that's been missing. Stillness. Not the kind that comes from giving up. The kind that comes from waking up. Because as you train your mind to observe instead of absorb, to pause instead of panic, to respond instead of react, you begin to see how much of your stress was never really about the world. It was about the story. The one that used to play on repeat in your head. The one that said, "They don't respect you. You're not enough. You need to fight back. You need to fix this." But now, you're starting to ask a new question. One that changes everything. What story am I telling myself right now? That story, that quiet narrative running in the background, it's the key to everything. Because every emotion is tied to it. If you see yourself as the victim, you'll feel resentment. If you see yourself as the villain, you'll feel shame. But if you see yourself as the hero, the one who rises, who learns, who keeps going, then even pain becomes fuel for your strength. Someone once said, "The first and greatest victory is to conquer yourself." And they were right. You don't conquer yourself by force. You conquer yourself by awareness. By choosing not to let your emotions drag you around. By choosing not to let the noise of the world drown out your own inner voice. And this awareness leads to something most people never learn. You can disarm people without lifting a finger. Think about it. When someone tries to insult you and you don't flinch, you confuse them. When they expect a reaction and you give them stillness, you unplug their power. Not because you're ignoring them, but because you're not owned by them. You're too quiet. Yeah, I like my peace. You don't care, do you? Not about things that don't matter. You think you're better than everyone. I think I'm better than who I was yesterday. That's not arrogance. That's clarity. And the beauty of it is, you don't need to argue. You don't need to defend. You don't even need to explain. You just need to be so rooted in your own self-worth that nothing and no one can shake it. But this strength, this peace, isn't just about words. It's about how you live. It's about what you stop giving your energy to. You stop wasting time fighting battles that aren't yours. You stop chasing approval from people who've already made up their minds. You stop feeding drama that only exists to pull you back into the old you. And little by little, something shifts. You walk into rooms with presence, not pressure. You show up to conversations with calm, not fear. You respond with stillness, not reactivity. And people notice, not because you're louder, but because you're clearer. They start to say things like, "You've changed?" And you smile. Because yes, you have. You're not trying to be everything for everyone anymore. You're not giving your peace away for free. You've stopped letting people live rent-free in your mind. You've stopped letting the world decide your worth. You're done being the puppet. You're the master now. And maybe that's the part no one tells you about aging. That in these later years, you don't lose your power. You discover it. But only if you're willing to let go of everything that was never really yours to carry. All those old stories. All that invisible pressure. All the habits of reacting, pleasing, proving. Let them go. Because here's the truth no one else might say to you. You are enough, exactly as you are. You don't need to perform to be valuable. You don't need to be perfect to be worthy. You don't need to react to be strong. You can be soft and grounded at the same time. You can be kind without being a doormat. You can be calm without being disconnected. You can be quiet and still carry more power than a room full of noise. That's the real secret. That's what it means to live with proactive calm. You're not ignoring life. You're meeting it with grace. You're responding with wisdom. You're protecting what matters, not because you're fragile, but because your peace is sacred. And every time you choose that peace, every time you pause instead of react, every time you stay rooted when others are spinning, you grow stronger. Not in a way the world always sees, but in a way you can feel. You feel it in your breath, in your sleep, in your conversations, in the way you carry yourself. And the best part? You don't have to be perfect. You just have to be aware. One moment at a time, one breath at a time, one choice at a time. That's how it starts. And before you know it, you're not just surviving life, you're mastering it. You're no longer reacting to every little thing, because you finally understand not every little thing deserves your energy. You're not rushing to fix other people's emotions, because you realize their emotions are not your responsibility. You're not overthinking someone's tone, their glance, or their delay in texting back, because you know their actions don't define your value. You've stopped needing to control the world, because you've learned to master your own response. And in that mastery, there is freedom. So if you've ever felt like your emotions were in charge of your life, if you've ever felt like the smallest things could ruin your day, if you've ever been tired of giving away your peace just to keep others happy, know this: you can change, not into someone else, but into yourself, your strongest, calmest, clearest self. And the world, it might not always understand that version of you. It might call you cold. It might say you've changed. It might try to pull you back into the old patterns. But you'll know the truth. You're not reacting less because you care less. You're reacting less because you finally care right. You've unplugged the noise. You've reclaimed your power. And in a world that rewards chaos and conflict, your stillness is a revolution. So keep going. Keep breathing. Keep pausing. Keep protecting your peace like it's the most valuable thing you own, because it is. And if this message spoke to you, if it touched something inside you that's been waiting for this shift, we invite you to stay connected. Leave a comment below and share your thoughts or your story. We read every one of them, and your voice matters. Don't forget to like this video if it helped you, and subscribe to the channel, Strong Elderly Life, for more content that supports your journey to calm, clarity, and strength. You've earned this peace. Now live in it. Here's to becoming the calm in the storm, and to living your best life at any age.